Hey, what's up, everyone? My name's Zack Olinger. In this podcast series, I talk about relationships. Now, I know, as a man, you may not want to talk about relationships, or you may even tell me that the relationship that you're in is already pretty good. But I'm going to invite you to consider this. Could you be a little bit more fulfilled in the relationship that you have? I would like to have you consider that there may be other ways to kind of see the conflicts that are truly just unnecessary that we all experience in a different light. And if you're open to receiving or just giving me a little bit of your time, then I look forward to my guests and I inspiring you to become a man that can have more freedom, less conflict, and more pleasure in their relationships. Thanks for joining me.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me on another episode of the Real Zack Olinger. Today, my guest is Padma Ali, and she is a guide and coach that works with executives to help them gain clarity and to step into their power. And today, we're going to start off talking about Padma's relationship with her 4-year-old and kind of some conflicts she might be experiencing in that relationship and whatever else may unfold from there. So thanks for joining me today, Padma. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Zack, for having me here. It's
Absolutely.
an honor.
Thank you. Absolutely. So what's going on with or I guess what has gone on with you in your 4-year-old? And if you don't mind, is it a boy or a girl? I'm just curious.
It's a girl.
It's a girl. Awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, she's such an amazing child. I just want to start off by saying that she's an amazing, amazing being. Mm-hmm. And she's a lot like how I was at her age. Mm-hmm. And that is part of how the conflict started. So, you know, my background is in psychotherapy. So I know I've done a lot of work around my own childhood and all that. And when she came along, and right from day one, like she has the most biggest personality and the biggest emotions in the most tiniest body. Like she's such a small person. It's really amazing to see like how this big personality is like in this tiny body. And that's part of her frustration. Again. And so being with her, it's extraordinarily inspiring. And it's like, it keeps us on our toes. And it's one of the most triggering relationships I've ever had. I'm like, oh my God, like how can this tiny person create so many triggers? And I noticed that I was finding myself muttering under my breath, like because I didn't want to say anything. I don't want to damage her, right?
Right.
So noticing like, oh my God, like I am having massive reactions. So part of this work was sitting with it and going, okay, what is it that's happening? Why am I getting so triggered by this tiny person? And it's my child. Like, I don't want to be triggered by her. Mm-hmm. And what came up was really profound. Like, it was like, wow, when I was her age and I used to have similar reactions, we look similar. She has similar personality like I did when I was at her age. And that was beaten out of me. So, and not in literal terms, but it was literally like, you know, like that was not okay to have that. Mm-hmm. And that was what was being triggered because part of me was having similar reactions to her, like how my caregivers did. Mm-hmm. And obviously part of me knew that that's not how I wanted to be. And so the conflict was less with her than within my own self.
Gotcha. Yeah. So then, yeah, that's good awareness. I guess like what, yeah, I don't know how many people, I guess there's some of your work and experience have that awareness that their kids are mirroring things to them or triggering them or that it's within them. Like I think most of us, at least before I started doing some of this work, the self-reflection and self inner work, it was a lot easier to be like, no, dude, that person caused that. Like that's not me. Like that was totally them. Yeah. And I've had a lot of that with my own kids too. Kids are great for reflecting that. It's usually, and my oldest son is not so much a big trigger for me. It's more about my youngest son, because again, like you said, like this, your daughter is a lot of, just like you were at her age, and my youngest son is exactly that way for me. Like he's just totally exactly the way I was when I was younger, and for sure absolutely triggers me the most. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's so fun to be a witness to that journey and to see like how did I want to be parent and how does she want to be parented? Like how does she want me to show up?
Right.
And it was very eye-opening. So part of this work was as I would parent her in the way she needed to be parented, which is with love and kindness and like patience,
Hmm.
I needed to do that with my own self. So part of it was also about reparenting my own parts of me that had struggled with that.
Hmm.
And that's how it started. I mean, not to say that she still doesn't trigger, that she doesn't get, under my skin,
Hmm.
but I have a lot more patience with her and with my own self, because then I would have a reaction. Like this is how it would go, right? Like I would have a reaction and then I would be hard on myself saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, this is just a child. She's like barely 4 years old or barely like she's just 2 years old, 3 or whatever. Like it's been going on for a while.
Hmm.
So part of this work was like, how can I reparent my own self as I'm parenting her?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, that's so interesting. I love hearing about it because I've heard some other people, talk about that as well. And then when I reflect back on it, like, and I think back on how I should have, because my youngest son now, he's going to be turning 13 here pretty soon. Um,
Wow.
so, so there's been a long time of me, not being aware, like of a lot of things. And even now, right? Like, I'm like, I do show up differently just because of like some of the things that I have become aware of, but I can say that like it's, and I know comparison is the thief of joy and things of that nature, but I do think sometimes about like how my kids, because I didn't have this idea of like reparenting myself, or I wasn't hard on myself when I was kind of being a dick to Milo. Although I would know that it was like, I would know that I was just being frustrated, and I had the intention every single time to like go back and talk about it and like like explore kind of like what happened. But I still didn't have the idea of like reparenting myself, or like understanding kind of like where it came from and trying to like reduce that in the future, that kind of a thing. Because I just felt justified being pissed off. I was like, and so my talks would be around that, just kind of like learning from him, but also explaining where I was coming from, but, and so anyway, this whole idea of reparenting and like just having that additional level of awareness of being like, yeah, that's coming from a different place, and like just trying to like be aware of that, like so that you don't have to feel justified, so you can just come at it from a different angle. Yeah, both of my kids didn't have the luxury of that for the bulk of their formative years. Actually, all of their formative years, I guess they're still being formed, but like, yeah, 13 and 15 coming up, 15 already, but yeah, Milo's still 12. But anyway, I just love it because I think that's a great just piece of awareness. And at least in my experience, it seems to be, I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but it's always the women that are talking about it, and it just makes me feel excited, and I I just love that awareness, because it's very true. And there's they don't want to live with regrets, but sometimes it's kind of like, yeah, it's nice to, would have been probably nice for everybody had I had a different level of awareness earlier on.
No, we only can do what we can do based on the
Right.
tools we're given. And I personally wouldn't have had any of this awareness. I only have this because I spent 20 plus years doing this work by
Hmm.
with other people. And so part of this, and I jokingly say I don't do therapy anymore, but I jokingly say that therapists are one of the most screwed up people on the planet because they find this profession not for doing this work with others, but it's more like to therapize yourself, if there's any such word.
Right.
So a lot of this work was about with me, and it would be amazing. Like when I would see my patients, they would have similar issues to what I was experiencing in life.
Hmm.
And it's not a coincidence, knowing what we know about vibration and attraction,
Hmm.
and it would attract similar issues.
Hmm.
So as I'm doing therapy with them, I'm healing my own self. It was very interesting. So I learned about parts work, which is like reparenting, inner child work, doing this work as a therapist. And so here it was being put to use.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I'm curious too, just from the work and like you said, attracting people that were like going through similar things. Did that strike you like early on, or was it just kind of like something that you grew into where it's like, damn, like these people are like, having the same thing going on in their life that I'm having going on? Because sometimes patterns that seem pretty obvious aren't obvious to us. I'm just kind of, this is totally just a random question, but I'm just kind of curious, like if you noticed it early on, or if it was something that you kind of grew into. Just wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was, I noticed it quite early on. Like I'd be like, what's happening? And then I caught on to the fact that, oh, I'm attracting this. That was the eye-opening piece. It was less about like the people coming. It was like, oh, this is not about, it's not a random coincidence that 10 of my patients have the same issues. Like it doesn't make any sense. I was like, oh, it's me. It's not them.
That's awesome. Well, that's cool that that you came into that awareness early on. And yeah, that's the other thing too. I've definitely had some friends and everything, we've got people in our lives, we talk and everything, of course. And like, yeah, it's like, what's the common denominator here? Like, you keep running into the same different issue, like across different relationships, be it professional or intimate or whatever, but the same thing keeps coming up. And it's kind of like, well, who's the common denominator? What's the common denominator here? So yeah, so it's always that piece is fun. I mean, it's not pleasant sometimes, obviously, where you're kind of like, oh, like that's, yeah, okay, I'm obviously doing something here to create this, but at least it is kind of fun to become aware, to like know that you have the power to change it, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
right. It's very empowering. To me, it was empowering to see like, oh, if I somehow attracted this, I can attract whatever I want.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, so I guess if you don't mind, like what were some of the triggers that like your daughter had? Because I've got some I can share about Milo and everything too.
So I think the biggest thing was like how big emotions she has, and it's like like she has huge emotions. Like she's like, like want something, and she's very, very strong-willed, and she wants something. So the other day, it's like, it's really amazing to hear this. And so she wanted something and she wanted something and she wanted something. I said, will you take no for an answer? So she tells me, you can give it to me now, or you can give it to me later. I'm like, oh my God, but this summarizes this 4-year-old, right? Like, this is how strong-willed she is. You can give it to me now or later. What would you like to choose? Like, okay. I was laughing at the same time. I was like, oh, all right, okay, this is how strong-willed you are. And I don't want to crush her spirit. So part of this work for me was the fear that I would damage her, just like I felt damaged for so much of my life because this was literally beaten out of me. And so that fear would create more conflict. Like, how do I still need to get her to wear her clothes and go to school, right? And then like peak winter, and I live in Boston, like in peak winter, she'll want to wear whatever she wants to wear. And I'm like, it's freezing cold. You're
right.
frozen. No, we're not going to school. Like, but nope, I'm doing what I want to do. And so part of this work was about like, okay, how do I honor who she is, her free spirit, and also get her to work with me and let go of the fear. So the place I landed with her often was recognizing that I am probably going to screw up. I'm going to mess up. And all I can do is do repair work.
Right.
Again, this is where, having that therapy background was so helpful, because I worked a lot with couples when I did therapy, and repair was such an important piece of a relationship. And I was like, okay, I can apply this to her. I am going to screw up, accept that I'm going to screw up. And how can I continue to repair things with her as and when it happens? And so, and she's very she's a very compassionate child as well. Like she's really like it's really incredible. She's marvelous. And so when I could take a step back and say, okay, she's complete, and if I let go of the fear, how can I show up? So it changed a lot. Like I would make mistakes, and she would have big emotions, and I would have reactions, and then we'd go and talk about it and just talk about like what was happening for me. And she really understood. She understood. And I would tell her, like, it's not you. I need to work on these things with myself. Somehow she just got it. So that was I don't know if that answers your question about some of the triggers that I experienced with her. It's more around her strong-willed personality.
I love it. I love that. So you can give it to me now. You can give it to me later. That's epic and awesome. I love that. That's fantastic. I have to applaud that.
Coming from a 4-year-old, that's what I'm like, oh my God, I
Uh-huh.
hear. And she's so articulate too. And I was like, oh my God, I am blown away. I don't know. I mean, I'm stumped. Half the
Yeah.
time, I'm like, you've worn me down. Fine, you can have whatever you want.
Right. This will be a force to be reckoned with. So this will be fabulous to see unfold for you. I'm excited for her. That's awesome. So I guess one thing I'm curious about, like before I kind of share and reciprocate on that, is the the repair. Like, what does that kind of look like for you as you do it? Because I have like my kind of way of doing it, and so I'm just kind of curious about like what that looks like for you, if you want to share that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it looks different with different people in my life. I mean, with a child, obviously, you have to get to their level and explain it without having to have her carry this burden of like whatever I'm experiencing, or feel like she has to protect me or take care of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is just taking ownership
Mm-hmm.
and just saying, hey, I didn't behave the way I wanted to behave, or you deserve to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's often sometimes what I would just tell her, like, you deserve respect, and how I talk to you was not coming from a place of respect, and I take ownership of that and I apologize. And she would just get it, and she'll often say, it's okay, mama, it's okay.
Gotcha.
And so that's how it would start with her. Or with my husband, it would be different. I can be sometimes very controlling in our relationship. Yeah. And so part of it is taking ownership of that, saying, yeah, that was not okay. That was really not okay. I can see how you would feel this way. And I take ownership of that. And so having a dialogue, but also letting them have that experience, because sometimes my husband's not ready to forgive, right? Like, he's like, no, that's not okay how you talk to me. And he might take his own time coming back. Children are more forgiving. They said they tend to be like, yeah, you know what? Okay, you screwed up, fine, not a big deal. We'll move
Right.
on. But adults tend to hold on a lot
Mm-hmm.
longer. And so, and I have to be okay with that. That wasn't okay with me in the past. Like, I would make a mistake, I would have whatever, and then I would apologize and expect him to come and join me right away. And that was not okay either. So allowing him to have his experience, trusting and knowing that when he's ready to talk, he'll come.
Gotcha. Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I could see that on both sides, like both with your children and with your partner, for sure. I mean, just because I've experienced the same thing, like where like my kids are definitely much more forgiving. But then yeah, with your partner, it's not necessarily going to be as quick or forthcoming. And depending even what it is, sometimes, well, it's on them to choose that. It may or may not happen.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's totally true. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Because I was curious, because like I said, I've done things to both of my kids, and I do the same type of thing, like that's why I spend a long time. My youngest son Milo likes to say that I give TED Talks, because I just talk forever. As you know, I can talk for a very long time about whatever. And so after an exchange or an experience or an episode or whatever you want to call it, I would make it a point to like try to like repair it and like explain what happened, explain my position. I wouldn't just leave it be, you know what I mean? And I'd want to go back and like make sure that we both got an understanding of what happened, where, you know, understand each other's sides and things like that. And what's kind of funny is that my oldest son is very witty, and he remembers things. He remembers completely random things. It's funny. He's kind of lost on the details of things, but he'll remember like things that seem rather obscure. So he remembers times like that I was like pretty shitty with him, you know, like just the other day, like was it 2 days ago, we were talking and I was like, when does that happen to you? And he's like, Dad. He was like, you were there. And I was like, and Milo was on the same call and he was like, I was there too. He's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah, I did that. I did that. That's how you know about that, because I did that. So, yeah, so with Milo, just kind of like with you and your daughter, like it's definitely like the emotional piece. Like Odin, my oldest son, it's not that he's very stoic. He doesn't really like swing very far one way or the other with his emotions. But Milo's he responds and reacts to stimuli the same way that I do, you know, and I can feel him kind of collapse and shut down, like when certain things happen, and I know exactly why, because I used to do the same thing. And so, yeah, there's sometimes those can be triggers for me as well, you know, because I'm like, I don't, just because I've gone through it, you know, I have that life experience and the growth where I'm like, I don't want you to suffer the same way that I did, you know, and I know that I caused this, like the way that I showed up, like, is causing you to respond the way, because that's how I used to do it. And so that's where that reparenting thing would come in. If I knew, then I would respond differently, or at least be aware. And then like one of the things that I have invited my kids to do, and Milo, I have to applaud for this, that I didn't get as a child. And even if I did, I'm not sure I would have taken advantage of. So what I've told my kids for a really long time is, just because I'm your dad doesn't mean I'm right. And I said, so just because I have this authoritative role doesn't mean that I'm right. You know, I said, so you're going to have to tell me, like, if I'm doing something or saying something or being a certain way that you don't like or doesn't work for you. I was like, you need to tell me. You know, I want you to totally be able to feel free to challenge me on that and tell me. And Milo, I mean, he's 12 now. This was probably, yeah, I'd say he was probably 9 or 10, you know. And I can joke with Odin a certain way, right? Like I can be very sarcastic and I can be like kind of rough around the edges, and Odin can take it and give it back. Milo doesn't joke like that, you know. And so I would try to joke with Milo this way because it's natural. It was kind of a very verbal roughhousing kind of a play. It wasn't, I wouldn't ever call it abusive, but it was just definitely more rough and tumble. And that's how me and my ex-wife were. Like, it's just kind of a definitely, it was kind of a way of showing love, but it wasn't like soft, you know what I mean? Like it just had its roughness to it in a way. And it's hard for me to articulate, but it wasn't always gentle, but it was playful. And Milo just, he wasn't appreciative. He didn't appreciate that, you know? And so he would tell me, he's like, don't joke with me that way, you know? And I'm like, oh, okay. And it found it difficult because I was so used to doing it, one, with my ex-wife for so long, and then with my oldest son. So for me to be like, all right, I've got to shift this, like with him. And if I didn't, then he would respond certain ways, which would cause that, you know, and then that might trigger me a little bit, you know? So yeah. Good times.
Parenting is such a mirror. Like your children, our children are constantly teaching.
Mm-hmm. That they are. Yeah. So I guess too, yeah, since you said, you know, with that in the mirroring and like reparenting yourself, did you find yourself like repeating some of the either same stories or behaviors that you were given, or like that you were modeled or told, like as a child, like when you were parenting as well? I found there's one particular one that I didn't even become aware of until last year when I was going through, you know, through TCP, that really broke something open for me. But I'm just curious. I think we all kind of do that in a way, right? I mean, I think it's almost like we can't escape it until we become aware of it.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. In some ways, yes. In some ways, it was also it was like my parents would just shut down when I would get this way. I would get more reactive with her. So it was kind of like they went the opposite way
Gotcha.
for some time, and then recognizing, noticing, and TCP really changed things for me
Hmm.
of how. And it's been a while. I don't do any of those reactions, but I was noticing it's more like becoming aware of like how profound it felt, like um, how it felt more inside than what was happening on the outside with her.
Gotcha. That's a good point too. Yeah, that's so interesting to hear it framed that way, just because like yeah, I'm not sure I've paid attention to that either, about how it feels on the inside as I'm experiencing it, like how it feels to me. I would say that's even really recent for me to even like try to think about that, like very like really recent, like less than like 2021 recent. You know. um so that's a good point. No, I just appreciate that. I feel like that'll stick with me too across like all relationships, you know, to be very just kind of aware of that barometer of like what does it feel like to me, like not, I know what it feels, and like I know I've been aware of like what it feels like to me, but like not, I think there's just a, it's hard for me to put into words, but there's, when you said it, there was a different type of awareness about it, or just
Yeah.
kind of like peace that I was like, ah, yeah, like that. Yes. It just makes sense. Um, so I thank you for that. So I'm not articulating it very well, but that was a different, I felt like there was a little different insight for me to pay attention to on that as it's happening in the moment, you know, which can be difficult in the moment, you know, because I think, well, at least I've been reactive, you know, for most of my life, you know, instead of trying to be aware and present all the time. And yeah, I know for sure, at least in the context of my kids, that's definitely been the case where, yeah, I just feel it's not, there's not the awareness of like being present and just kind of being like, hey, so how are you feeling? Why, like, choose how you're going to respond. It's more like, no, I'm going to react and then I'll clean up later. And that's actually one thing too, to going back to the repair piece. I can remember for sure there was a time that we were in the my kids and I were in the Target parking lot. I can't remember how old Milo was. He was probably, I don't know, between 7 and 9 or something like that. And um, I had been, you know, I'd say shitty with him somehow. And I told him, I was like, look, I was like, that's all me. I was like, that has nothing to do with you. And I said,
Mhm.
like, and the metaphor that I would use is I was like, you can't go around picking up people's bags. I was like, if it's not yours, don't pick it up. Like I said, so this right here is, don't pick up my bag. You know what I mean? And just don't take that on,
Yeah.
which I know for him, I can say that, but because he was just like I was as a kid, like it's very, that's a challenge, you know, for him. It's
Mm.
because like it, for him, like it happened to him, like, so how could he not kind of take it personally, you know, like it
Right. Right.
sounds like something like, that's great, thanks for the words, but like he doesn't really know how to not attach himself to it, which he's gotten a lot better. And what's really cool here recently, you know, he started reading the book Awareness, and all of that, and having gone through TCP and listened to some of Jim's podcasts and stuff like that, like
Oh,
over the
nice.
last, yeah, he started listening to the podcast, although I don't know how many episodes he's listened to, but he started reading the book Awareness this year. And so over the last 3 months, like just the way that he's developed some of his like thoughts, and like the way that he sees things, and the way that he is starting to like frame them in his mind is like
Mhm.
really shifted. And I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. It's amazing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so I feel good about that, because it's giving him a way to really not take things personally and attach to things that were previously things that he would totally take on. So I'm
Mm.
like this is where I've been trying to kind of get to, because I know as a parent, and this is a story too, and I haven't reframed it quite yet, but I've said for a long time, I was like, as parents, we kind of don't have like I don't know if there's really a way to not give our kids like some form of baggage. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think
Yes,
it's just
no,
kind of
very often.
it's just kind of what we're meant to do. Like, in a way, I think like we're supposed to create the circumstances for the lessons that they're here to learn. And part of that is to give them things to work through. Like,
Mhm.
like, so I don't beat myself up on it. I do
No.
know, I do look and see that, like, I'm like, I don't like to revisit some of the memories that my oldest son likes to bring up. And so I'm kind of like a little sheepish on those. And at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I could have showed up a lot better in that particular instance, you know? And he's very forgiving about it. He usually just brings it up to joke. He's never actually brought it up to be like, you remember this? And like make it a point of like, yeah, like that was not cool. He's never said that. He usually jokes about it. But I think at the same time, like, even though he's not like bringing a serious tone to it, like, the fact that he remembers it, I think that there's probably something there where he's like, my dad was kind of a dick, like, you know. But at the same time, I think he does forgive me on some level. So I think about that. I've thought about that for quite a while, where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm giving my kids, because sometimes even when you have the best intentions, like, there's kind of no escaping it, you know, like, in a way where it's kind of like you think it's going to be interpreted one way, or you intend for it to be interpreted one way, and it just doesn't land that way for them. So
That's such a good point you're bringing up, because one of the things that has always stood out for me, which one of my mentors shared with me, is that you will miss 80% of your children's needs. You will miss 80%. But the 20% that you do pay attention to makes up for that 80%. And to me, that was very profound, because we will. I mean, like, this morning she was crying because in the middle of the night, like, and it took me some time to go there, and she's like, I was so whatever, she had a nightmare, whatever. I am going to miss that. And I don't know what impact it has. All I can do is, when I'm present, I can be fully present. And like you said, they're going to have their own experience in life, and all we can do is equip them with tools so they can deal with whatever comes up.
Right.
And do the best we can. At the end of the day, we're all doing the best we can. None of us, even our parents, did the best they could given the tools they had. And so, yeah, like you, I don't beat myself up. I'm like, all right, it happened. I could have done better, yes. But given what I have right now, I will choose to do better going forward.
Yeah, that's definitely, it goes into, like, I guess there's that saying, right? Like, the only competition you have is with yourself, and just try to be the better version of you tomorrow than you were today, right? Like, yeah. So yeah, I can agree with that and get on board with that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let's see. I don't know. I don't if you have anything else you kind of want to go on about with that, or anything, or if you feel like a natural conclusion. I'm going to edit this, so it's okay if we just kind of like lull, or if there's another direction you want to go. I didn't necessarily have another question come up around that, so
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to add, other than, like, this is when I talk to my clients who are parents, or just other friends who are parents, like, parenting is one of the most rewarding and challenging jobs you'll ever have, and a job that doesn't have an ending to it.
That's true. Yeah.
And you do the best you can, and be loving and kind towards yourself. And whenever there's a trigger, now I know the trigger is not coming from them, it's coming from me, from whatever is being triggered within me, that I need to just face and deal with. And when I do that, the external relationships, even with them, it just smooths over.
Yeah, that's one thing that I can say that I've been very grateful for, is learning to take responsibility for that, and knowing that it's always inside of me when I feel triggered. And that, yeah, once I started doing that, that definitely changes so much in relationships. It's really profound, I think. I don't know how else to like put it, but it was a huge thing that yeah, again, that's pretty recent, over the last year, that I became aware of that, to start doing that. But yeah, across the board, that's been a real game changer for me to just take responsibility and just start working from that angle. And
Right.
it's been very healing and insightful. I mean, yeah, at first, I think when I first kind of had the idea, I remember I said the story a couple of times. There was a saying, and I can't remember what it was, but it was embroidered. I worked at a telephone company in college, and one of the women had something embroidered, and it had said something to the effect of like, we're responsible for like how we respond or react, not to like, like not the things that like kind of happen like to us. I'm not phrasing it very well, but I just remember kind of being like, no, man, like I didn't like the idea of taking responsibility or ownership, right? Of like how I responded. I'm like, no, somebody did something and like they're going to deserve the response that I give them. You know what I mean? That's how I felt. And like now that I'm older, and as I got older, this thing stuck in my brain and I kept thinking about it over and over. And the older I got, it became more like apparent that like, yeah, all right. And then last year for sure, it like clicked on a deeper level as I went through TCP. But taking that ownership was a giant thing for
Yeah.
sure.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I guess we'll just kind of wrap it up then. But I want to give you the opportunity to like let people know how they can reach you or work with you, and like how they can find you. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.
You'll find me on Instagram. This is where, among all the social media, that's where I seem to hang out.
Okay.
At Padma Ali, very simple. And you can also, I have a podcast of my own. It's called Create Your Vibrant Life, which is all about how you can create whatever life you want at whatever life we desire. And so it's all about that. And that's about it. And padmaali.com. If anybody wants to work with me or see what I offer. Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I'll include those links as well in the description so that
Thank
people
you.
can find you easily. So awesome. Well, thank you, Padma. I appreciate the chat and talking about our children and how they give us a great like sandbox to play in and grow in a way.
Great way to put it. So true. Thank you for having me, Zach.
Absolutely. Thanks, Padma.
All right. That wraps up today's episode of The Real Zack Olinger. Thanks again for listening. If you happen to find this episode insightful or valuable, I invite you to pass it along to somebody else, because chances are, if you found it valuable, they will too. If you're on Instagram, you can find me at The Real Zack Olinger. Until next time, everybody. Thanks for listening.